My brother didn't help me carry the last box. He lifted his phone instead. He waited until I was halfway down the driveway, took the shot, and posted it before I reached the truck. The caption read, "Failure to launch successfully launched." Within 10 minutes, 123 relatives had liked it. My mother commented that the house already felt cleaner. My father left a laughing face. I stood beside everything I owned and watched the notifications arrive, one after another. I didn't answer a single one. Not because I had nothing to say, but because in my jacket pocket that afternoon was a sheet of paper with my father's name on it, signed as the witness to a loan I had never signed. It was the third Saturday in June, and someone 2 houses down had just cut their grass. I remember that better than I remember his face. The smell came across the yard in waves, green and sweet and completely indifferent to what was happening in front of it. My hands were cold. That is the part I still can't explain. 84 degrees in central Ohio, sweat on the back of my neck, and my fingers were cold enough that I fumbled the last box twice before I got it up onto the truck bed. The cardboard scraped across the metal with a sound like something being dragged out of a room where it was never wanted. Then I heard the shudder. He didn't even try to hide it. He was standing on the front step in his socks, holding the screen door open with his hip, and he took the picture the way people take pictures of car accidents. Quick, casual. Already thinking about who to send it to. I set the box down. I closed the tailgate, I got in and put my seatbelt on and sat there for a moment with my hands in my lap, waiting for them to get warm. They didn't. Here is what I want you to know before I tell you anything else. The next morning, this is what my phone looked like. 6:02. My father. 11 messages. 7:14. My sister Bridget. 22 missed calls. 8:30. My mother, 1 line. Please give us one chance. 9 o'clock. My brother Cole deleted the post. 12 hours earlier. They had been laughing in the comments with 123 of our relatives. By breakfast, they were begging. And I hadn't raised my voice at anyone. I hadn't called a single one of them back. I had sent 3 emails. I should say this now, before we go any further. This story is fiction, but nothing in the procedure is. The FTC identity theft report is real. The notary journal is real. IIRS. Form 14039 is real, and it's free, and you can look every one of them up tonight if you ever need to. That is the entire reason I'm telling it. I used to think revenge meant making people feel the exact shape of the pain they had handed you. I spent a lot of years imagining that. What I learned instead cost more and was worth more. Sometimes the strongest answer available to you is simply to stop carrying someone else's consequences. That's it. That's the whole thing. You don't have to burn anything down. You just have to set it down and let it stand on its own weight for the first time in its life. My name is Nora Kessler. I'm 26 years old. If you went through our family albums, you would find something I didn't notice until I was much older. In every group photograph taken after I turned 16, I am standing at the edge of the frame. Not once did anybody put me there. I put myself there. That's where you stand when you're the one who will take the picture over if somebody blinks. My father, Wade, had been a notary public for 22 years and an insurance adjuster for longer than that. He was the man neighbors came to when they needed something signed and stamped. My mother, Diane, chaired the finance committee at St. Bridget's for 6 years. She was the one people trusted with the parish books. Cole ran a landscaping company and was the family's proof that ambition existed in us. Bridget was a nurse, married, 3 miles away, and very good at not asking questions. And me, I was an accountant. I spent 40 hours a week finding other people's errors. I want you to hold that in your head for the rest of this. Every adult in that house was, in one way or another, employed to be trustworthy. Before I go any further, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how does an accountant not check her own credit? I'm going to answer that right now, because the answer is the entire story. When I was 17, my mother made me an email address. She called it my grown-up email. She set it up on a Sunday afternoon at the kitchen table, and she was cheerful about it. And I remember feeling important. The password she chose was a variation of my birthday, and she wrote it on an index card and put the card in the drawer beside the stove, where it stayed for 9 years. She installed a credit monitoring app on her own phone and told me she'd let me know if anything ever looked strange. She said a girl my age shouldn't have to worry about that kind of thing alone. She said it the way you'd offer to carry something heavy for someone. For 9 years, every alert, every letter, every verification call traveled the same road. It went to my mother's phone. She wasn't hiding anything. She never had to hide anything. She was simply the one who walked out to the mailbox every morning. For 9 years. I want to be precise about this, because precision is the only defense I have left. When I was 22, my score dropped 71 points in a single month. I noticed. That's the part nobody believes. So I'll say it plainly, I noticed. And I called the bank about it. The woman on the phone was kind. She had to verify my identity before she could discuss the account, so she pulled up my security question. Name of your first pet. I said Buster. Wrong. I said Daisy, my grandmother's beagle. Wrong. I tried one more. A cat we'd had for maybe 8 months when I was in 3rd grade, and the line went quiet in that particular way that means the conversation is over. She was very sorry. She couldn't help me. She suggested I come into a branch with 2 forms of identification. I want you to understand how small that moment felt at the time. It was a Tuesday. I was standing in the break room at my first job, holding a cup of coffee that was going cold, and I felt embarrassed, not suspicious. Embarrassed like a woman who couldn't remember her own dog. I never made it to the branch, because that night I told my mother about the call, and my mother laughed and said, "Oh, honey, it's Tucker, from before you were born." She had chosen the question, she had chosen the answer. Neither one had anything to do with me. She said the banks make mistakes constantly, that she'd handle it in the morning since she had the account information anyway. The next evening, she told me it was taken care of. And I believed her. I was 22 years old, and I believed my mother. I don't think that made me stupid. I think it made me ordinary. There's one more thing you'd want to know. If you were building this case the way my attorney eventually built it, nobody ever called me about a debt. Not once. No collection notice, no late fee, no letter from a law office, none of the things that would have made this obvious to anyone paying attention. Because for 14 straight months, my parents made the minimum payment on all 3 accounts. Everyone, on time, every cycle. An account that's paid on time never goes to collections. It never gets flagged for fraud review. It never generates the phone call that wakes you up on a Saturday morning and changes your life. It just sits there, current, perfectly healthy, quietly eating my ratio. My credit wasn't destroyed. That would have been loud. It was suppressed, held just low enough that every door I tried to walk through happened to be locked. And every time I asked why, someone in my family had a gentle explanation ready. Here is what accounting taught me. And it's the only professional skill that mattered in any of this. When you find an error, you correct it. When you find the same error twice, you check the process. And when the same error repeats in exactly the same shape, in exactly the same direction, in favor of exactly the same people, for 9 consecutive years, it isn't an error anymore. It's a procedure. Somebody designed it, somebody maintained it, somebody got up every morning and walked out to the mailbox to keep it running. I wasn't tricked. I was engineered. 3 weeks before I moved out, I got the thing I had been working towards since I was 22. A firm in Columbus, 4 times the size of the one I was at, offered me a senior accountant position, $31,000 more a year, a named path to manager inside 3 years. I signed the conditional offer letter on a Wednesday in my car in the parking garage, because I didn't want anyone at my current job to see my face while I did it. With it, I could sign a lease alone, without a co-signer, without asking anyone in my family for anything, ever again. That was the whole reason the job mattered. Conditional meant the usual things: references, employment verification, and a financial background check, because senior accountants handle other people's money. I wasn't worried about the background check. I want you to sit with that for a second. 11 days later, on a Thursday, a FedEx envelope arrived for me at my office. The receptionist called me down at lunch and handed it to me in the lobby. I opened it standing up, next to a rubber plant, with people walking past carrying salads. Inside was my own credit report, the full one, every page. I had never seen it before in my life, not once. And the first person who ever put it in my hands was not a bank, not a lender, not my mother. It was the human resources department of a company I hadn't even started working for yet. Clipped to the front was a form letter. 3 paragraphs, very polite, explaining that the firm was considering adverse action on my conditional offer based on information in a consumer report. Behind it was a document with a federal header across the top, a summary of your rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and at the bottom of the letter, in smaller type, the sentence that started the clock: I had 5 business days to respond before the decision became final. I didn't read it the way a frightened person reads. I read it the way I read a trial balance. Because that is the only way I know how to look at a page of numbers without falling apart. Line 1, a revolving credit card account, opened 14 months ago, balance $19,400. Line 2, a business line of credit, $34,000. Beneficiary listed on the account Kessler Outdoor LLC. Line 3, a personal installment loan, $24,500, disbursed in a single transfer to a joint checking account. I recognized the last 4 digits. My mother called it the house account. $77,900. I sat down on the steps in the lobby and did the only thing I know how to do. I added it again. The number didn't change. Behind the summary pages were the statements. That's where it stopped being arithmetic. Kitchen cabinets, delivered in March, a sofa, 2 nights at a hotel on East Bay Street in Charleston, and a dinner that cost more than my car payment, all in one weekend last spring. I knew that weekend. My parents had posted 11 photos of it. The caption said they'd finally given themselves something for 30 years of marriage. I liked that post. I remember liking it. I remember typing that they deserved it. I stayed on those steps for a long time. Then I looked at the letter again. 5 business days, not 5 days to be angry, or cry in my car, or decide what kind of daughter I wanted to be. 5 business days to produce documentation a compliance officer would accept or lose the job. And with it, the only exit I had ever gotten close to. Thursday, That gave me until the following Thursday. I want to tell you that I felt something enormous in that moment. Rage. Maybe. What I actually felt was what I feel when I find a variance. I can't explain a very cold, very quiet need to know where the other side of the entry went. Somebody had made these numbers. Entries don't appear. Somebody sat down and put them there. And somebody signed for them. And somebody answered the phone when the lender called to check. I put the report back in the envelope. I folded the envelope in half so nobody walking past would see the header. Then I drove home, to the house I still lived in, where the woman who had the answers was making dinner. My mother was loading the dishwasher when I came in. She had her back to me, sorting the silverware into the little basket the way she always did, forks together, knives points down. I put the envelope on the counter and said the 3 numbers out loud. She didn't turn around right away. When she did, she looked at the envelope and then at me, and her face did nothing at all. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the answer she gave. The thing that came before the answer. She didn't say what she didn't say, "Are you sure?" She didn't say, "Let me see that," which is what anyone says when they're being told, for the first time, that $77,000 exists somewhere with their daughter's name on it. She said, "You're getting confused. Sweetheart, families move money around. That's all this is." I have thought about that sentence more than any other sentence in my life. Not because it was cruel, because it was ready. People only have an answer prepared when they have already rehearsed the question. She kept talking while she worked. She said she and my father had shielded me from complicated decisions because I got overwhelmed. She said the word overwhelmed twice, gently, the way you describe a weather condition. And I stood in the kitchen I'd eaten in for 26 years and watched my mother explain me to myself, using words she'd been using about me since I was a teenager. And for the first time, I heard them as what they were, not opinions, documentation. My father came in halfway through. He didn't ask what we were discussing. He didn't have to, he'd heard the numbers from the hallway, and he crossed the kitchen and stood between us and looked at the envelope on the counter without touching it. He is not a loud man. That's the part people get wrong about houses like mine. He never raised his voice, not once, not in my whole childhood. He lowered it. That was the tell. When my father wanted a conversation to end, he made you lean in to hear how it ended. He said, "As long as you live under this roof, you don't ask how this family survives." 14 words. That sentence had run our house since before I could read. It had ended arguments about curfews, about college, about the year he was out of work and my paycheck covered the property taxes. It was never a threat. It was a door closing. And everyone in that kitchen had been trained to hear the latch. I didn't argue. I want to be honest about that. Because a braver woman might have. I said, "Okay." I rinsed the cup in my hand, set it in the rack, dried my fingers on the towel hanging off the oven handle, and went upstairs. I had said okay to my father maybe 1,000 times in 26 years. That was the first time it was a lie. I packed for 6 days. I also did something else, and I did it carefully, in my room, with the door shut and my new email open on my laptop. Every lender has an online portal. If your name is on the account, you can request the origination file, the full application, exactly as it was submitted. I pulled all 3. I saved them twice. Once to a drive and once to cloud storage. Nobody in that house had the password to. On page 4 of each application was a signature. Nora Kessler, looping, confident, and wrong. The lowercase r was written backward, a small reversed hook, the way a child writes it before someone corrects them. I have never written an R like that in my life. I sat on my childhood bed with my laptop on my knees and wrote my own name 40 times on a legal pad, just to be certain of something I already knew. The verification phone number listed on all 3 applications was the same. It was my mother's cell. Downstairs, nobody's behavior changed at all. My mother asked what I wanted for dinner on Wednesday. My father watched the news. On Friday, my sister Bridget stopped by and told me she thought a little independence would be good for me, and hugged me, and left. Cole leaned in my doorway the night before the truck came, looked at the boxes, and laughed. 6 weeks, he said. You'll last 6 weeks. He was almost right about the timeline. He was wrong about everything else. The first call I made from my new apartment was to my Aunt Kathy Mercer. She is my mother's older sister. She spent 29 years as a compliance officer at a regional bank, which means she spent 29 years reading applications for the specific purpose of finding what was wrong with them. She had also been slowly removed from our family since my grandmother's funeral, not with a fight, with logistics. Holidays that got rescheduled after she'd booked her flight. A group text she somehow wasn't on, my mother saying, with real sadness in her voice, that Kathy had become difficult since Mom died. I hadn't spoken to her properly in 4 years. I want to be clear that I had let that happen. Nobody forced me to stop calling her. I just absorbed the family's version of who she was, the way you absorb the temperature of a room. I sat on the floor of an apartment with no furniture in it and told her everything. And she did not interrupt me one time, not to gasp, not to say she was sorry. She let me finish. And then there was a pause long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Okay, get a pen. Listen carefully. Nora, you do these in this order. 1, tonight, not tomorrow. Tonight you go to identitytheft.gov. That's the FTC. You file a report and you do not stop until you have the document called an FTC, Identity Theft Report. With that in hand, federal law requires the lenders to block those debts from your file within 4 business days. Without it, you're just a woman on the phone saying she didn't do it. 2. Freeze your credit at all 3 bureaus, Equifax, Experian, TransUnion, each one separately. It's free. That's federal law too. And they don't advertise it. 3. Change every password you have. New email. One you set up yourself. Do not reuse a single phone number your mother has ever touched, including the landline at that house. 4. Save your brother's post. Screenshot it with the timestamp visible, and save every comment under it, including your parents. Save it tonight, because he will delete it. And 5, this one matters more than the other 4 put together. She slowed down. You collect only what belongs to you, or what was sent to you. You do not open anyone's phone. You do not log into anyone's account, not even one your mother set up in your name. The second you take something you don't have a right to, you hand them the story, and the story becomes about you. You need clean evidence. Nora, anger is not evidence. At 11:42 that night, I filed the FTC report from a laptop balanced on a moving box. It took 40 minutes because I stopped twice to check that I'd typed the dates correctly. At 11:58, I submitted written fraud disputes to all 3 lenders and attached the identification, the proof of new address, the specimen signatures, and a statement saying I had not authorized any of it. At 12:20, I emailed a fraud attorney Kathy recommended, a woman named Patricia Holloway, and copied Kathy on it. I want to tell you what that hour actually felt like, because people imagine it as powerful. It wasn't. I was sitting on the floor of an empty room reporting my own parents to the federal government, and my hands were shaking so badly I had to type my social security number 3 times. But I noticed something while I did it. Every form asked me for facts, not for feelings, not for my side, dates, amounts, account numbers, addresses. For the first time in my adult life, nobody was asking me to explain myself. Then I built the timeline. Because I'm an accountant, and a timeline is just a ledger with dates instead of dollars. March of last year, I applied for an apartment in German Village. I'd saved the deposit for 11 months. The property manager turned me down on debt-to-income ratio and seemed embarrassed about it. My father said the city was too expensive and that I should stay home until I was stable. September. I tried to finance a used car. The rate came back at 21%. My mother said, "Let me put it in my name. Honey, I can handle it. January." A landlord in Clintonville wanted a co-signer. My father offered before I could ask. I put those 3 rows next to the account opening dates. Every wall went up within 9 weeks of a new account. 3 times I tried to walk out of that house, and 3 times something rose up in front of me at exactly the right moment. My father told me I wasn't stable enough to live alone. He knew exactly why I wasn't stable. He built the wall. Bridget texted me 4 days later. Not a call, a text, and a careful one. "Can we talk? Just us. I'm not going to tell them." A year earlier, I would have said yes to her kitchen, or a coffee shop she picked, or anywhere she wanted. Because that's what I did. I said the lobby of my building. There are cameras in that lobby. There's a desk with a man named Reggie behind it from 7 to 7. There are people coming through all afternoon. I didn't choose it because I thought my sister would hurt me. I chose it because I had finally learned to think about a room before I walked into it. She came on a Saturday morning without makeup, in the sweater she'd clearly slept in, and she handed me a manila folder before she said hello. Inside were screenshots, 14 pages of them, printed in order. The group chat was called Kessler HQ. I wasn't in it. I want you to understand that I had a family group chat. I was in one. We used it for birthdays and asking who was bringing what. This was a second one. Same people, -1. Cole Bank says I need another guarantor, or the line dies. I'm stuck. Dad used Nora's profile. Her income is clean. 0 debt. Mom. She owes this household more than she understands. Cole. Will the bank call her mom? I'll handle the verification. Bridget. Does she know? Is she okay with this? And then nothing. Not an argument, not a defense, not somebody typing and stopping. Nobody answered my sister. The conversation simply continued. 3 messages later, my mother asked who was bringing dessert on Sunday, and my father said he'd pick up the ham, and Cole sent a thumbs up. And that was the end of the page. That's the detail that made me sit down on the lobby bench. Not the cruelty, the ordinariness. They didn't debate whether to do it to me. They didn't need to. Somebody asked a question about my consent. The question died on the screen the way a question dies at a table when everyone decides not to hear it. And then they talked about ham. I asked Bridget why she never followed up. She had an answer ready, which told me she'd been rehearsing it in her car. She said she'd assumed our parents asked me afterward. She said Mom mentioned a few weeks later that the financing had been sorted out, and Bridget took that to mean it was sorted out with me. Then she stopped performing, and the real sentence came out. I didn't ask again because I was afraid of the answer, she said. And if I didn't know, I didn't have to do anything. She started crying. I didn't. I did not forgive my sister in that lobby. I want to be honest about that, because I think people expect the scene where the sister cries and the sisters hug. But I took the folder. Kathy called me that night at 11, and she didn't say hello either. I need to ask you something, and I need you to think before you answer. Did your grandmother ever set up education money for you kids? I said Bridget got hers at 21. It paid for her nursing program. I said Cole's got put into the company. Dad called it an investment. I said mine was gone. Tuition. They told me, used up. There was a pause. Nora, you went to Ohio State on scholarship. Most of it. I worked nights at a warehouse for the rest. Then what tuition? I didn't have an answer. I had never had an answer, because I had never once asked the question out loud. Then Kathy said the thing that changed everything, and she said it slowly. I need you to tell me who was named in that trust. Do you know who your father was? No. He was the trustee. She let that sit. Your grandmother appointed him to hold that money for you. Patricia Holloway's office was on the 4th floor of a building on East Broad Street, and she had a conference room with a glass wall, which I thought was strange until I understood that people behave differently when they can be seen. She did not ask me how I was feeling. She did not say she was sorry this had happened to me. I have thought about that a lot since, because at the time it felt cold. And now I understand it was the first respect anyone had shown me in months. She asked 3 questions. What can you prove? What did you sign? Who benefited? Then she spread my documents across the table in date order and worked through them for 90 minutes without speaking. And when she was done, she had circled 3 things. 1, the credit card application had been submitted from an IP address registered to my parents' home internet account. Not a coffee shop, not a phone, their living room. 2, the business line of credit had been approved after a verification call, a real call, logged, time-stamped to my mother's cell phone. Somebody answered that call and confirmed she was me. 3, she tapped the last page. This one, the personal loan agreement, carried a witness signature, Wade Kessler, my father's name, in my father's handwriting, attesting that he had watched me sign the document in front of him, and beside it was a notary seal, his own. I said, he notarized it himself. He notarized it himself, she said. Nora, that isn't a father helping his daughter with paperwork. That's an officer of the state certifying that something happened. Do you see it? She said. Look at your family. Your father is licensed by the state of Ohio to verify signatures. Your mother holds the books for an entire parish. You audit other people's ledgers for a living. 3 people paid to be trustworthy. And 2 of them decided you would be the one who paid. There was something my father had forgotten, because he had been a notary for 22 years and no one had ever checked him. The state of Ohio requires every notary to keep a journal. Every time he stamps a document, he has to record it, the date, the time, the type of document, the name of the signer, the identification he examined, and the signer has to sign the journal, right there, in front of him. That journal does not belong to my father. It belongs to the state. Anyone can request a copy. An online form, $15. No reason required, including me. The copy came 9 days later. I opened it on the kitchen table of my new apartment. Under a light bulb, I had changed myself. March 14th, 2:40 in the afternoon, personal loan agreement, signer Nora K. Kessler, and a signature, with the R written backward. I sat there for a while, then I opened my phone, went into my photos, and scrolled back to March 14th. There is a picture of me standing outside a hotel on Dalton Street in Boston. On a break between sessions at a conference my firm had paid for, it has location data, it has a timestamp. There are 2 coworkers in the frame, both of whom later signed statements saying exactly where I was. 560 miles from where my father pressed his seal. He wrote it down himself. In his own handwriting, in a book the state required him to keep, and he kept it very carefully. For 22 years, I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that, because I think this is the part of the story where you expect me to. What I felt was tired, and something underneath the tired that I couldn't name for another week. It was this: my father had sat at a desk, opened a book, and written my name in it while I was 4 states away eating a hotel breakfast. He had to think about me to do that. He had to picture my signature well enough to imitate it. Patricia explained what it meant in the flattest voice imaginable. Notarizing for a person who is not physically present is a felony in Ohio. It means permanent revocation of the commission. It also means his surety bond, the insurance every notary is required to carry, specifically to protect the public from him, would have to pay out to the person he harmed. That person is you, she said. Then she added a second claim to the file and told me it was the heavier one: breach of fiduciary duty. Your father didn't steal from a stranger, she said. He was appointed to protect that money for you, in front of a judge. That is much worse. Patricia did not tell me not to go. I expected her to. I had brought it up carefully, the way you bring up a bad idea you've already decided on, and she listened and then said that a meeting was fine under 3 conditions. 1, I would read from a page she wrote, and I would not improvise. 2, I would accept nothing, agree to nothing, and sign nothing at that table. 3, if anyone raised a hand, blocked the aisle, or asked for my phone, I would stand up and walk out mid-sentence. Then she said the last thing almost as an afterthought. And, Nora, we're in Ohio. You don't need anyone's permission to press record. You only need to be one of the people in the conversation. I chose a small Italian place on Main Street. Narrow booths, bright overhead lights, the unflattering kind, loud enough that nobody could hold a private conversation, and full enough that nobody would want to raise their voice. Kathy sat at the bar with a glass of wine she never drank, a notebook open in front of her, writing down what she heard as she heard it. Contemporaneous notes, she called them. I got there 30 minutes early and put 4 labeled envelopes on the table. Cole came in first, and his face was fine until he saw them. My mother came in behind him, pale, her mouth pressed thin. My father sat down across from me without taking off his coat, which was his way of saying he wasn't staying. Bridget sat down next to me. It was a small thing. It took 2 seconds, and it changed the entire table, because every person there understood immediately that the sides were not what they had been for 26 years. My father looked at the envelopes and said, "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I slid the first one toward him. "I'm giving you the chance to tell the truth before somebody else requires it." They opened them. Nobody spoke for a long time, and the restaurant kept being a restaurant around us, which I found strangely steadying. Somewhere behind me, a server was reciting the specials. My father got to the page with his own seal on it, and that was when his voice dropped. "Turn that phone off." I turned it face down on the table. It was still recording. I didn't lie to him. He asked the wrong question. When the document stopped working, he went to the thing that had always worked. He leaned in, lowered his voice further, and said, "Stop performing for strangers. Remember who fed you for 26 years. I took out a spreadsheet and set it on top of his envelope. 4 years of transfers, printed, with dates and confirmation numbers, the electric bill, the furnace we replaced in January of the year he was laid off, property taxes, twice, groceries, 2 separate transfers to Cole's company that were never repaid and never mentioned again, $53,000. "You called me a freeloader," I said. "The freeloader paid for the furnace." My mother started crying. She did not apologize. She said keeping a family together requires sacrifices, and that I was reducing love to numbers. I said she had reduced me to a number first, and that at least mine added up. Then I put down one more page. It was my tax transcript. You can download it from the IRS website in about 4 minutes, and it is free. And until 3 weeks earlier, I had not known it existed. For 3 consecutive years, I had been claimed as a dependent while I was working full-time, filing my own return and paying my own rent to the people claiming me. Patricia had said something to me the week before, and I repeated it at that table word for word. You can forgive your parents. That's your right. But the Internal Revenue Service doesn't forgive anybody, and it doesn't need your permission. My father did not answer. He looked at my mother, and my mother looked at the table, and Cole looked at the door. I put my coat on. Before I left, I asked them one question. Not to win. I already knew nobody was going to answer it. I asked it because I wanted to hear how it sounded in a room full of people eating dinner. If a stranger opened $77,000 in accounts under your names, would you call that a misunderstanding? Nobody said anything. The server came back to ask if we were ready to order. I said we weren't, and I went home. The collapse did not happen all at once. It moved through my family like a row of falling doors. First, the bank froze Kessler Outdoors' credit line and demanded invoices for every dollar spent. Cole lost the company's largest summer contract. His investor pulled out, and Cole sold his truck to cover payroll. Then Wade's notary commission was revoked because his insurance appraisal job required an active commission. He lost that job too. Diane resigned from the parish finance committee. No one asked why. That frightened her more than accusation could. After that, their alliance dissolved. Cole blamed his parents for dragging his company into their scheme. Wade blamed Cole's business for attracting attention. Diane blamed me for refusing to stay quiet. They had spent years acting like one body. Under pressure, they discovered they were only 3 people protecting themselves. After mediation, my mother asked me to wait in the courthouse hallway. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a photograph of Diane at 23, standing in front of a rented house. She looked thin, tired, and determined. On the back, in Ruth's handwriting, were 7 words, "Diane, this is the last time." My mother took from me too. Diane said, "I thought that was how families survived." I held the photograph for a long time, looking at her young face. I understood something that made me sad. She had not invented this pattern. She had inherited it, accepted it, and continued it. Then I returned the picture. "You knew exactly what it felt like," I said, "and you still did it to me. That does not make you more deserving of pity. Mom, it means you understood better than anyone what you were doing." She lowered her eyes, but I did not mistake shame for change. The settlement required my parents to sell the lake house near Lake Erie. They also withdrew $128,000 from retirement accounts to repay the $86,000 they had taken. The difference disappeared into taxes, penalties, and the 10% early withdrawal charge. My parents lost more than they stole. That is the entire point of compound interest. It does not care who you are. Cole's public correction was another condition. He had to repost the same old photograph he had once used to humiliate me and keep it visible for 30 days. The new caption was written by my attorney. It contained no insults, no revenge, and no dramatic language, only the truth. People often ask whether I forgave Bridget. I believe her now. That is one thing. Calling her on a Saturday night just to talk about nothing is another. We still text. Sometimes she sends me a photograph from work. Sometimes I answer the next day. Neither of us pretends that one honest decision repaired every dishonest silence that came before it. What remains between us is real, but it is not restored. 3 months later, an unfamiliar number with an Ohio area code appeared on my phone. Ms. Kessler, I'm an investigator with the Ohio Attorney General's office. We received your file from the FTC and the Secretary of State's office regarding the notary matter. I stepped into the hallway. I need you to understand something. He continued, your family's civil settlement means nothing to our investigation. We were never a party to that agreement. I understand. Would you be willing to testify? Through the glass wall, I could see the conference room. My name had just been written on the board beneath the words Senior Accountant. Yes, I said. I have been ready for a very long time. That Saturday night, I returned to my small apartment in Grandview. I walked to the building mailbox carrying a key that belonged to me. Inside was a pizza flyer and an electric bill in my name. I stood there for a long time, holding that bill with both hands as though it were something precious. Some people need 4 years and a lawsuit before they are allowed to receive their own mail. I am one of them. I did not destroy my family. I only stopped serving as the foundation of a house that was crushing me. When someone calls you ungrateful for demanding honesty or selfish for setting a boundary, ask who profits from your silence. My family thought I was powerless because I was patient. They mistook my patience for permission. So let me ask you something, and I truly want to read your answer. If you were me, would you have stopped with the public correction, or would you have taken the call from the Attorney General's office? Write your answer in the comments. I read them all. And if you have ever felt like the person standing at the edge of the frame in your own family, subscribe every week. I tell a story for people like us.